Whenever we receive an email from Valerie at LEWITT, we know something awesome is already heading our way from Austria. What we didn't expect was what turned up. Anyone who's seen our channel over the last year or so knows that we highly recommend LEWITT's microphones, and their mics are always our first choice when leaning into the mic cupboard to record pretty much anything. So we were quite surprised when we opened the box and found an unusual looking audio interface. Another entry-level 2-channel audio interface. Does the world really need this? Find out in today's video. The LEWITT CONNECT6 is a new small form factor audio interface with much more flexibility than initially meets the eye. It's a dual USB-C interface for both content creators and musicians, and so being a music production content creator, we tick both of those boxes. When I first saw the physical interface, my assumption was that it had quite limited functionality. It looks remarkably simple with a one-knob control and a handful of sockets on the back, but that is exactly where it excels. It takes a simple hardware design and expands the flexibility of that design using software. There are two XLR TRS combi mic inputs with both mic and line inputs. However, the TRS jack inputs are line level only, not high impedance instrument inputs. So in order to plug in a guitar or bass, you'll need to use a DI box, which is no bad thing because a lot of high impedance instrument inputs on budget audio interfaces don't sound particularly satisfying anyway, and often much better results can be achieved with a good quality DI box running off of phantom power. There are two outputs on 1/4-inch TRS jacks, as well as a single 3.5mm speaker output, and next to these lie three USB sockets. One for power and the other two for connection to a computer and a mobile device, or indeed a second computer. However, this device can be bus powered, so the power USB-C socket may never actually be used in many cases. This interface is compatible with Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android, so there's a hugely open market of people who can make use of this device. Finally, there's a 3.5mm auxiliary input, as well as two headphone outputs on the front of the device. There isn't really much more to look at on the hardware side, so before we move on to the software, which I'm super excited to talk about, let's look at the large volume knob on the front. This is a multi-function knob with the function being highlighted on the LEDs to the left of the VU meters. The user can switch between preamp input 1 and 2 and headphone 1 and 2 simply by clicking the knob downwards. A nice touch and very simple. Secondly, the metering is bright, and thanks to the aforementioned LED labels to the left of the VU meters, it's super easy to see at a glance exactly what you're controlling. However, the real appeal of this interface lies in the software. I've used a few interfaces recently which offer great complexity in what they offer, yet in order to make that work, the user interface is equally complicated or laggy or just generally a pain to use if you don't bother reading the manual. I try to avoid reading manuals at all costs and just push buttons until things work, as I find that the easiest way to get to know products and software. Many people disagree with this method, but that's what works best for the way my brain works. In fact, that's pretty much how I learned to edit YouTube videos. Push buttons until it works, then later on learn some theory about how to actually make it look professional. My journey learning how to use the CONNECT6 went very much the same way, except without any of the frustrations common with me ignoring manuals. This software has a supremely well-designed user interface. It's simple, it's easy to use, and anyone with a pair of eyes and at least 4 brain cells can figure out how to use it in no time at all. Starting at the top left, the auto gain feature found on an increasing number of interfaces nowadays is the first button you'll come across. LEWITT have provided a pretty in-depth setup for the auto gain system, meaning you can get exactly the sound you're after in almost no time at all. Firstly, you're asked what you've plugged in from a choice of condenser microphone, dynamic microphone, or instrument input, and up next, the system asks what you'd like to do with the aforementioned input. Singing, talking, or playing an instrument all require very different processing, so it's nice to see that LEWITT is pointing the AI in the right direction before you even hit go. Up next, are you going live or recording? Again, there may be different production techniques needed for each. Next, you have to speak or sing into the mic for 10 seconds to allow the software to get a level for the input gain, followed by 10 seconds of silence to allow for ambient noise detection. And that's it. Nice and simple, and it's worked flawlessly every single time I've used it. Below the auto setup button for each input channel are the input gain controls, followed by phantom power, high pass and phase inversion buttons, and finally a mute button. There are signal processing features below this, namely an expander, compressor and equalizer, all of which sound great without introducing any horrible artifacts. Each of these signal processors do their job perfectly well and really helped us to achieve the live stream sound we've been after for quite a while, whilst all being contained within one tiny box, and so it certainly fulfills its intention of being aimed towards content creators. There are also two master mix outputs, both with maximization options, and there are some fairly detailed routing options, including loopback, which can be sent to the speakers, headphone outputs, or indeed to those master mixes. Having the audio control software up on one screen whilst switching video on another during our live stream was the perfect combo, and the software is lightweight enough to use almost no processing power on a Mac M1 Pro system at all. I must mention that I did discover a bug with the system on the current version of the Control Center software, and the LEWITT team are aware of it, but have still asked me to mention it. On the main user interface, performance of the CONNECT6 is fantastic and there are no signs of lagging. However, when you open the expander, compressor or equalizer, visual performance takes a slight hit, and when you move any dials or sliders within these windows, there's a tendency for the interface visuals to drop to around 1 frame per second. I've only found this issue to be present on a MacBook Pro M1 Pro, and LEWITT are working on a fix, so I can't imagine this will be an issue for too long. Despite this visual lag, there are no audio dropouts, and so if you just use slow movements when adjusting settings within the processing windows, really you shouldn't have any issue at all. In terms of the sound of the CONNECT6, as with any LEWITT product, I'm impressed. The preamps sound great, and when we used this on our live stream, we used a pair of 440 pure condenser microphones. The dialogue sound I managed to achieve with very little processing whatsoever, a touch of compression, and that's it. It ended up working really well for our use case, and I have no complaints. LEWITT mics are always high quality, and so I would recommend using one of their own mics if you decide to try this interface. However, this is only a recommendation, and any microphone with an XLR or TRS plug will work. But what does a fat, grumpy mastering engineer think?
I must admit that when I heard that an already oversaturated budget 2-channel audio interface market was going to be populated with yet another one, my first thoughts were, do we really want to review that? And then I copped eyes on this when James was testing it and instantly fell in love with the very modern aesthetic. I like the design a lot, and it's well built and weighty enough to not slide around on the desktop or slide forwards and rear its back up when you plug things into it. And then it quickly followed a very common trait of LEWITT products, and that trait is that when I need to use something in the studio, I just naturally gravitate to anything with a LEWITT badge on it. Why? Well, because it just works. It sounds amazing, and I know it will let me get the job done in the best possible way with no fuss. And in this case, I was recording the awful introduction song for our live stream, and this was in the room ready to be tested out for the streaming setup that night, and so I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And I plugged it in, and it asked me what I wanted to do with it, and I told it, and plugged in a mic, and plugged in a pair of headphones, and it set itself up and just worked. And then it became completely transparent throughout the entire creative process. The software is fantastic, very simple to use and aesthetically very pleasing, and it just sounds great. Typical LEWITT, clean, neutral, uncoloured and accurate. The mic preamps make a quiet microphone signal louder. I love the metering, the white LEDs look classy and modern, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. So there is a place in a crowded market for this little puppy. We named our channel Present Day Production because we think that the studio world should be learning from live sound and video worlds and not stuck in 1976. And the very fact that this looks like a futuristic spaceship docking station comes with a genuinely forward-thinking, intuitive and very useful piece of software rather than yet another bundle of modelled vintage hardware plugins, and sounds as good as it does, means that if I need to record, podcast or live stream with no more than 2 mics, it's just going to be the default unit I grab. We're not sponsored by LEWITT. This is my honest opinion, and I know it can sound a bit boring when everything we review from LEWITT gets such a glowing review, but that's because they deserve the glowing review. This, I mean, it's even got if something's going wrong, there's error correction comes up on the LEDs and it tells you what it is on the back. Just a fantastic product. Very well thought out, very well designed, looks great, sounds fantastic. Massive thumbs up. Love it.
So how much does a powerful box like this actually cost? You can get one online for an average of £270, putting it firmly in competition with interfaces like the SSL2 Plus, and I would choose this interface out of any 2-channel interface at the price range, purely because of the functionality and clearly well thought out software integration. Yeah, it looks a little odd, but it's a design that's grown on me and I've started to appreciate its small form factor much more after having to squeeze it onto my desk during live streams. This interface has solved a long-standing issue for us and it couldn't have arrived on the market at a better time, and I'm under the impression that LEWITT have absolutely nailed their new product once again. If you're looking for an interface to either record dual input musical scenarios such as singer and guitar, or indeed use it for live streaming as we did, I highly recommend checking it out. If you'd like to hear a high quality multi-track recording using the CONNECT6, check out Produce Like a Pro's video on it to hear how it performs with musical content. Thanks very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please remember to like, subscribe and ding the ding dong, and you'll see us in the next one.